Well, probably best to sketch our product by starting to define the need or the problem that we address. That is as follows. The energy market is going through a rapid transition, increased penetration of renewable energy, a very good thing. The energy market is evolving into a more sustainable market. But that also brings challenges for the electricity grid, and that is where the need lies. And so essentially, because you have a lot of renewable energy on the grid, which is intermittent in nature, you do get from time to time misforecasts, which create imbalances on the grid. So sometimes the balance between supply and demand is not entirely okay. And then you need a solution. And that is the problem that we solve.
Okay, so if I'm getting this correctly,
yes.
We used to have a grid where we burn some coal, natural gas, or nuclear in a central location, and we slurp it up and power our refrigerators, charge our Teslas, and generally burn it. And that was kind of predictable, and it was a one-way world.
Indeed.
Now, people are spending $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 on solar panels, putting in power walls, and providing their own electricity, and in some cases, feeding that electricity back into the grid.
That is right.
The grid was not exactly designed for this purpose. Is that correct?
That is right. If you look at the way that the grids are built, you're exactly right. You used to have these big power plants right in the center, then you have some transmission grid around that, and then you have the distribution grid, which brings this electricity ultimately to the consumers. But so now all of a sudden you get a system where these consumers are becoming prosumers. They're also producing power, and so electricity starts running in the other direction, and it gives all kinds of problems, transformers that are overheating, and just a network that is generally not built to support such a system.
Now, this is confusing to me, because as a neophyte outside of the industry, it would seem to me that adding all this solar capacity at the point of consumption would only act to reduce the stress on the grid. And what I don't understand in reading about the grid is, why can't the electricity just be dumped? Why doesn't electricity just dump off the line? Or why don't I just not have my solar pump it into these transistors and overheat the grid? Why is that a problem and not a benefit?
Yes. So in the electricity grid, you need to make sure that the supply of power is at all times equal to the demand of power. Otherwise, you will lose certain parts of your electrical load and you will get problems into the grid. Unless you have large amounts of storage. And historically, that has not been available in the grid storage. Only now that is starting, you have grid scale storage, really large batteries that are being put into the grid, and you have smaller size storage like power walls that are hanging on people's walls when they have solar.
So the grid needs to have a certain consistency of power.
Yes.
The power needs to be flowing, and power flows across these lines at a very slow rate. It's not whipping down. It's just got to be this slow trickle down the line, but it can't just go on and up and down easily. Is that right?
Well, so the flows of the electricity are managed on the grid typically by these big power plants that are producing that electricity, and then part by part they are brought to the end consumer. But these transformers, for instance, they are not built to support large streams of electricity which go in the other direction, and then you get into trouble. And so that's where also our solution starts to play a role, because typically what grid operators do in order to manage this balance between supply and demand is they reserve gas-fired plants, flexible generation plants, and the only thing that they do in the entire day is to move their generation up and down based on the needs of the grids. When there are shortages, they increase them. When there are excesses, they decrease the output.
So those are like mini suppliers of energy on the grid somewhere. Not the main suppliers, but mini producers.
They're the backup, if you want, to make sure that balance between supply and demand is kept. But that's a very expensive solution. It's quite a polluting solution. If you think about a gas-fired plant that is used for that, it's quite polluting.
Right.
And so that's where a better solution is found in demand response, and that is what our business is about.
Let me just take a quick moment to thank Scott Ed Walker and the Walker Corporate Law Group for supporting This Week in Startups. The Walker Corporate Law Group is a boutique law firm specializing in the representation of entrepreneurs and startups, and I've personally known Scott for a long time, and a lot of my angel investments use him as their attorney and speak incredibly highly of him. The Walker Corporate Law Group encourages fixed fees, which they believe really helps startups, and I know it does because you don't get that surprise when you get your bill every month. And they believe, actually, at the Walker Corporate Law Group, that billable hours reward inefficiency. They want to get things done, and they want to get it done quickly and efficiently for you. Keep those billable hours actually reasonable so that you can grow your startup and put the capital where it belongs in the product. All of their lawyers have decades of experience. There's no junior associates getting on-the-job training, and they provide tons of services, including M&A, licensing agreements, terms of services, and privacy policies. If you want to talk to the founder himself, Scott Ed Walker, you can call him directly at 415-979-9998. That's 415-979-9998, 979-9998, or you can email him directly, Scott at Walker Corporate Law. Scott at Walker Corporate Law, and you just put in the subject line, Jason sent me. And you can visit walkercorporatelaw.com, and you can follow Scott at Scott Ed Walker on the Twitter. Thanks, Scott, for supporting independent media like This Week in Startups.